So now next ahead, we will see the changes in these three stages. Yeah. Is everybody able to hear me and see the screen clearly?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, one thing I would just like to inform everyone before I start the class is in case anybody is trying to join the meeting with a different name, they will not be permitted because we have got actually strict orders from the education officer. There's a block education officer in each district. So you might have seen it in the news also. They have given us strict instructions that this link should not be provided to any outsider, and no outsider under any circumstance should join our classroom meetings. This is for the safety of the children themselves. So if anybody is joining here with a different name, no, they will not be permitted. So many times, just now I saw some Nobita Empire and some nonsense name I saw. I did not permit them. They might even call you and ask you, "Sir, is not permitting me." Then please ask them to put their correct name, and then they'll be permitted into the meeting. Okay, so that was a quick information. Yeah. So next up in this lesson, we will see what are the changes in these three sectors, because the changes in these three sectors are very significant, and these changes are actually what we have been seeing as an economic change in our country. So let us see how the changes have happening in these three sectors, which sector has become more important for us and which sector has reduced its value towards contribution to the Indian economy. So the initial stage, that is the primary sector, we observe that the changes have come in the development patterns of this sector, and it is found that in the initial stages of the development of the primary sector, the important sector of economic activity. Earlier, during immediately after our independence, the primary sector was a extremely important sector for us because this is where the base of the country has to grow. It would include agriculture, it would include mining activities. So production of all these raw materials, it would also include our dairy. So we have seen significant development in all these sectors for the past so many years, and you can know for a fact that in present status we have become surplus in most of these things. It could be food grains or even vegetable production. You saw that even in our geography in agriculture, you saw that how we are one of the leading producers of vegetables in the world. So this production has increased so much that now we are in a position in the dairy sector, so we are in a position to even export our dairy products. That is the amount of production that has increased so much. So in the initial stages of our independence, this sector is the base formation for any country. If the sector, primary sector, is extremely strong, then the remaining sectors will continue to develop. If we do not have, and as example, if we do not have proper mining activities, then the raw materials are not available for manufacturing process, for the further processing process in the secondary sector. So what would happen over here is the secondary sector, to continue their manufacturing activities, they will have to import the raw materials, and importing of raw materials will definitely add to the cost of the final product which is produced by the secondary sector. And this again, this cost will get carried forward to the to the tertiary sector. If this sector is producing, is giving active services like transportation of these raw materials, that also will be added over there. So n number of costs increase if the primary sector is not strong. As the methods of farming changed and agricultural sector began to prosper, it produced much more food than before, and many people could take up any other activity, which led to the increase in the number of activities. However, at this stage, most of the goods produced were natural products from the primary sector. Hence, most people were employed in this sector. You will learn when you read a textbook. You will also understand that initially in the state there was a time when this primary sector was the most labor intensive sector. Most labor was used in this particular sector, but now slowly there is we are seeing a slight shift in the amount of labor also which is employed in the primary sector.
Sir, even green revolution has impacted.
Definitely, absolutely right, Sagar. Green revolution has definitely impacted our grain production, our vegetable and fruits production. Definitely it has impacted over a long time, more than 100 years or so, because new methods of manufacturing were introduced, factories came up and started expanding. People began to work in factories in large numbers, and also people started using factory goods in large numbers as they were cheap. Secondary sector gradually became the most important in total production and employment. There was a shift, and the importance of the sector also changed. In terms of the industrial revolution, you would have learned in your earlier classes also in lower classes you would have learned that the invention of the steam engine is something which triggered the entire industrial revolution, but this industrial revolution came to India very very late. You can say our industries actually started developing only after we received after we gained independence. Prior to independence, the Britishers were not interested in developing our own industries because most of the material used to get shipped out, get exported to the European countries. So industries in India started developing only after independence, after the government set up so many government companies with their own, public companies, and they started involving directly in the secondary sector. In comparison to that, if you see the European countries. The industrial revolution in the European countries started way back, almost towards the ending parts of the 19th century. 1875, those were the years when the industrial sector was started growing in leaps and bounds in Europe. So there's a huge difference between the industrial revolution in Europe and the industrial revolution in India. That is the reason why the development gap has also increased. That was the secondary stage. And the third stage, that is the tertiary sector. In past 100 years or so, there has been a further shift from secondary to tertiary sector in the developed countries. The service sector has become the most important in terms of total production. So you will see the shift in focus mainly in the developed countries. If you take up, or you can, if you can, do a study of the activities which mainly happen in European countries and even in the American continent, North American continent, you will see that the service related sector, mainly the IT sector, health sector, education sector, transportation services sector, all these sectors have grown leaps and bounds, and mainly the IT sector, which is again a huge part of this tertiary sector. And this growth is so exponential that the effects of that, the outsourcing effects of that, is what we have been seeing as a growth in our IT sector in India. Okay. Yeah, so this part, the change in the employment habits and the growth of these different sectors, is it clear to everybody? Is anybody having any doubts in this part?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, let us talk about exams later. Okay, please don't break your head about exams. Exam will come when it comes. We will tell you well in advance, and that time you can study for it. Don't worry about exams as of now. Concentrate on studying. Hmm.
Okay, sir.
So, yeah, Prathamesh says the shift is due to existence of several factories and industries as the farmers are engaged there and are receiving good wages. Yes, correct. That is right. Yeah, okay. So, rising importance of the tertiary sector in production. Over 30 years between 1973 to 2003, production in the tertiary sector has increased the most, and it has emerged as the largest producing sector in India, replacing the primary sector. Okay. Role of tertiary sector in India, the transition shows level of country's development. It improves specialization, but it's better to avoid extending service part in economy over 40 or 50% of the GDP. Let us take, for example, our healthcare services in India. Our healthcare services in India, especially the private healthcare services in India, has grown so exponentially in the last 25 years that India is also known as a tourist destination for health services. You might not, you might be surprised to hear this, but many people from our neighboring countries which include Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, from the UAE, from Saudi Arabia, from these countries, from the Gulf countries, many people, they come to India specially for taking healthcare treatment. And this is because the services provided by us are reasonable compared to those same services which you get in foreign, in the European or in the Americas, and it is almost equivalent to the treatment which you would get in European countries or in the Americas. So this healthcare services has grown so much, and of course it's a part of the tertiary sector. Another part of the tertiary sector which you will see has grown so exponentially is our IT sector. Our IT sector actually initially it started out with outsourcing. Lots of work started getting outsourced from the Western countries because our India is blessed with a large English speaking population. Everybody, almost majority of the population receives English education in the schools. So we have a large English speaking population, and plus our population is so large, we are able to work for a much lesser amount. Plus, we also don't worry about working for extra hours. We have a tendency that the more I work, definitely the more I will get paid. That is the normal mentality of the Indian. So these were the factors which led to large scale outsourcing of support services work in the IT sector. Mainly, it came started in the way of call centers, technical related call centers, software related call centers. All these call centers started getting migrated from the Western countries to India, and this mainly happened because of the factors which I told you earlier. Uh, this Call centers mainly you would see that they were established in locations like Bangalore, Hyderabad. These two cities came to be known as the Silicon Valley of India. That was the amount
Yes,
of
sir.
outsourcing work which started coming up in these two cities, and it is still there. But now we have moved on from that. This call center work and all that is now rather minimal, but we have moved on from that. We are more into development with the beginning of huge companies like Infosys, TCS, all these Wipro. These three huge software companies which we have in our country are on par with any Western technological related company. So Mrunal says rising importance of tertiary sector means people are more oriented towards arguing over goods rather than making them. I don't quite understand this point, Mrunal. Arguing over goods rather than making them means they are services related to those goods rather than making, not arguing, but services related to those goods, support services for the goods. Prathamesh says demand for services such as transport, trade, storage will increase with respect to development of primary and secondary sector. This directly develops the tertiary sector more comparatively. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so has everybody understood the role of the tertiary sector in employment? Any doubts over here?
Sir, yes.
Yeah.
Sir,
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Uh, Small show of the growth of our Indian economy over here. GDP, the difference between the growth in 1999 2000 prices. Okay. So, where are most of the people employed and why? The primary sector employs the largest number of people in India. It is because not enough jobs were created in the secondary and tertiary sectors. See, now one thing you need to understand about our secondary and tertiary sectors is these two sectors require skilled labor. These two sectors they require skilled labor. Unskilled labor is primarily required in the primary sector. So if we have a larger portion of people who are unskilled or with lower quality of education, they will definitely get good employment in the primary sector, but this workforce will not get employment in the secondary or tertiary sector, because here is where education is important and skilled labor is required. That is why the wages earned or the salaries earned in the secondary and tertiary sector are much more higher as compared to the primary sector. So this is one thing which you need to understand very clearly. That is the reason why primary sector still is the largest employer of people, because we have a percentage of people who are not skilled and have not maybe completed their secondary and university education. That's the reason why most of the people would get employed in the primary sector. Is this clear to everybody? Any doubts?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Sir, even educational unemployment promotes primary sector.
Yes, correct, correct. That's true. Yeah, Prathamesh, your point, liberalism of financial sector provided an environment for faster growth of financial services. Liberalism of financial sector provided a environment for faster growth of financial services. Okay, I'll explain this point to you. In the year 1990, we had a opening up of our markets. This was done by the finance minister Manmohan Singh, who was there at that time, and Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, to the Congress government in that year. And they opened up our markets mainly because we had an extremely restrictive market prior to 1990. Uh, the only car which was there in India was a Fiat and a Maruti 800. That was the kind of market we had. The only television that we had in India was Onida and Videocon, and the only refrigerator that we used to have for the houses was Godrej and Kelvinator. So this was the restrictive, such a restricted this we had, because most of the companies were government owned. The private sector had not evolved or grown to such an extent, because there was a very tedious process for registration of newer companies and for setting up industries. It was a very tedious process, very restrictive practices by the government, because government wanted to have a very tight control over the industries. So all this was liberalized in the year 1990, and along with this, the finance sector also was liberalized, because prior to this, there were very few private banks actually functioning in India. Insurance companies were very minimal. There were only government-owned insurance companies, and yeah, these were the two main, finance sector means the insurance companies and the banks. So the banking sector started getting many private players into the banking sector, and many insurance companies from outside, international insurance companies set up their offices after the liberalizing of the economy. So this 1990 is a very important year in terms of liberalization of the entire Indian economy. Is that clear, Prathamesh? Key, right? In fact, after 1990, we have seen our this entire tertiary sector, and the growth trajectory of our economy after 1990 is almost like a shooting arrow. If we see any graph of our economic growth after the year 1990, it's extremely sharp. The growth has been extremely sharp because our markets were fully open. Became actually a global market after 1990. Okay, yeah.
Sir, it is different. Yes, more people are educated.
What's that?
Sir, I guess it is due to more people got educated and then not.
More people got
Before that, they were
educated.
not, like
No,
before that, they were not educated that much.
no. It has actually nothing to do with education, Anish. See, because
I
education
guess.
was definitely there was a good education scope in India prior to that. The only thing was the very tight control of the government over the entire industrial sector and these three sectors. That was something which restricted many foreign companies from entering our market. But once this was totally opened up, these restrictions went off. So we have many foreign companies entering into the Indian market after the year 1990. Education didn't have anything much to do with it. It was mainly the practice which was followed by the government. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
I have faced.
Okay, underemployment. Now, this is a situation where people are apparently working, but all of them are made to work less than their potential. A very fine example of this is, in our school. In our school, we right now, since the classes are not occupied, children are not coming. We have some maushis and we have some office boys. Right? You will remember that our maushis are there. Hmm. Right now, they are being underutilized because they don't have much work. They just come sweep the floors, clean the classrooms, and that's all. But when children are there, definitely they do have much more work. So over here, this is like an additional cost, but still, right now in the present situation, they do get paid their salaries. So what happens over here is it is like an extra cost for the school, but obviously we cannot remove them from their work. So here it is they are employed but being underutilized. This is the situation of underemployment. Another way of understanding this is also family-owned businesses. Family-owned businesses normally tend to get their own family people into the shop to get to work with them, and many times they might not even have any work to do. Same thing goes for family owned farms. Family owned farm might get the entire family members to go to the farm and work over there, but whereas two people would be sufficient to do all the work in that farm, the remaining three or four people are extra over there. They really don't have any work to do. So this is actually underemployment or a hidden unemployment, you can say, right? So it is hidden in contrast to the open unemployment where a person is clearly or visible without a job. It is also called as disused unemployment. So this workforce is actually not being used over here, and this situation is prevalent in many sectors in India. This is underemployment. Also, it also happens in other sectors. For example, there are thousands of casual workers in the service sector in the urban areas as painters, plumbers, repair persons. Many people who do not have actual employment, they are trained to do the work, but they do not have full-fledged, full-time employment. So this underemployment is a huge problem for us because it shows like these people are employed, but whereas they are not actually earning any amount to contribute towards the economic growth. So whenever employment happens, employment should be full-fledged, wherein full quality of wages can be earned by that person. And once he earns that entire amount of wages, he is able to contribute in turn to the economy, because once I earn a proper amount, then I will go and spend that amount or save a particular amount. So this cycle starts when I spend the amount, it gets into the entire economic cycle. So people spending money is actually a good sign. It's not that you need to spend your entire money, but people should spend the money that they earn, not save the entire thing. The spending is required for the economic cycle to continue. Otherwise, whatever goods are produced, people will not purchase unless and until they spend it. So understood this point of underemployment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, problem of unemployment gives rise to the problem of poverty. Yeah, definitely correct. We have learned about poverty in length last year. We learned about that, right? That
Sir,
is
purchase
also right.
would help.
Yes, Agar?
Sir, purchasing of more goods will rise of GDP.
Producing of more goods will contribute to rise of GDP. Yeah, correct.
No, sir,
Yeah.
purchase.
Purchase. Yes, definitely. See, I'll tell you how the cycle works. See, once goods are produced, they have to be utilized. Utilized in the sense they have to be purchased. If purchasing comes down, obviously the production is going to come down because there will be lots of unsold goods. So unsold goods is again an additional cost for the person who is producing those goods. Got it now? So if what I produce is not sold, I will have a bulk of goods which is lying unsold. It is adding to my storage cost, it is adding to my inventory. I have to again look after those unsold goods. So next year when I have to produce, I will produce lesser because I'm having last year's produced goods which are not sold. So obviously that will bring down the GDP. So to
Okay,
get
sir.
GDP up, there should be purchasing power, there should be continuous purchasing also. This will definitely, it directly impacts the GDP. Lesser purchasing power. There should be more purchasing power in the hands of the people. But the purchasing power also should not be so much that it will increase the inflation. This also you need to understand. Now, say for example, in a particular city, 100 bags of rice is produced. Hmm. And in that city, there are 10 people, 10 families who will purchase this entire 100 bags of rice which is produced. Now, what happens suddenly because of some problem? There is, there is a, what do you say, there is a bad weather. There is bad weather, and because of that, the people lose their work. But this 100 bags of rice is already produced. 100 bags of rice is already produced, but instead of 10 families purchasing them, only 5 families are having the money to purchase that 100 bags of rice. So that is going to leave 50% of that or 50 bags of rice unsold. Now the farmer who has produced these bags of rice, next year he will produce lesser because he still has 50 bags of rice which is unsold. And for taking care of that 50 bags of rice, he has to search for a place, a godown where he can store those 50 bags of rice. He has to pay rent for that godown. He has to see that rats don't come and infest that godown. He has to incur extra cost for all those things. So the GDP for the next year will come down because he has produced less. Right. Now, another, in a different term, if you see these 10 people who, 10 families who normally purchase this 100 bags of rice, if they start earning extra, they do extremely well. They do extremely well in their business and they start earning more. And there is a fight among these families who is going to buy more bags of rice. This 100 bags of rice is already purchased and they still want to buy more, and they are ready to pay any amount to pay for that 100 bags of rice. So what is going to happen over here, that cost of those 100 bags of rice which is normal, whatever was there, is going to go up. And when the cost of this rice goes up, that is in turn affect your inflation. The cost of living will also go up. So there should be a balance so that the purchasing power is not increased to such an extent that it will drive the cost of living up. Is that clear?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So this economics is extremely very very beautiful subject wherein real world situations. This is actually something which you will see in your real world, in your real life. You will experience this every day. It is not any imaginary kind of situation. All these things happen every day, everywhere in our lives, in each and every country around us. So that's the reason why economics is such a beautiful lesson topic to learn. Okay, so let me quickly recap what we did today. Today we learned about the contribution of these sectors to the economy. We learned about how the first, second, and third stages, how they have been contributing to the economy, and how we have seen a shift in the importance of the tertiary sector. How the tertiary sector has grown, especially in the last 20-25 years, and it is employing more and more people. Also, the primary sector, definitely it's still employs more people, but in terms of unskilled labor. This is where the more labor is used, whereas secondary and tertiary sector will use more skilled labor. And then we learnt about underemployment in terms of people not being utilized to their full potential, and due to that it is a disused kind of employment. Our resource, that is human resource, the most important part of any economy, is being underutilized, right? So any doubts about today's class today?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Yeah. Inflation mainly means not a change in the currency value, but inflation actually means a rise in the cost of general products. The 1 kilo of rice, when I was in school, we used to get 1 kilo of rice for 10 rupees. I remember because I used to go to the grocery store and get a kilo of rice. Normal, good quality rice, 10 rupees was the cost in the shop. Nowadays, for 10 rupees, with great difficulty, you might be able to even get one pen, but not 1 kilo of rice. 1 kilo of rice, any good quality rice nowadays in the market costs around, if I'm not mistaken, around 38 to 40 rupees, normal quality of rice. So that is called as inflation. The cost 20 years back and now it has risen to such a high extent. That is basically inflation. Okay.
So even
Okay, sir.
oil price, right?
Even
The oil.
everything, see, basically everything, the cost of each normal household products has gone up exponentially. Earlier, when I was in school, when I was studying, my father was working, and the monthly budget of our house used to be around 4,000 rupees. 4,000 rupees में everything, groceries, milk, electricity bill, everything used to happen in that 4,000 rupees when I was in school. But today, easily around 15,000 rupees would be spent normally for a household budget. 15 to almost 18,000 rupees is the normal monthly budget of any household. So where is 4,000 and where is 18,000? That's almost close to 5 times the increase. So 5%, 5 is your, that is the inflation, rise in the cost of living. That basically is
Okay,
inflation.
sir.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all for today's class. Please do read your textbooks. So you have any doubts, you can post it, or else you can also ask